In this video, we are talking all about the Bob Chapek, Peter Rice drama, the story, the massive story that shocked everybody yesterday. We're going to break it down, talk about it, and speculate up next. Hey everybody, welcome aboard to another episode of OG55. I brought my fantastic panel, my family with me today, producer Dre, Vash, Sky, and Alia Aloha to talk about this Peter Rice story that dropped yesterday. There are so many layers to this story. It's redonkulous, absolutely redonkulous. Well, we're going to dive into all that. Before we do, let's introduce my panel. Producer Dre, Vash Sky, host of Freshly Squeezed. Welcome back.
Yeah, happy to be back. After having been a few days in California, got to see you, got to see the other OG55 members like George. It was a lot of fun, and I'm so happy to be back in the saddle, as you so eloquently put it before the show. Hey, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about some other just incredible things going on within the actual entertainment industry itself. And for those folks at home, these things, if you're here for the parks specifically, just understand that these things affect the parks greatly, or at least they can. So I think it's really important that we share that. But if you want to talk to me, you can go ahead and do so right there at VashGuy on Twitter right there. And if you want to see me, well, it's on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove. So that is where you can find me.
Perfect. And you're absolutely right about that. That's why on this channel, we dive into a lot more than just the parks. The parks do not exist in a bubble. These executive things and the business end of the company dramatically affect the parks. And I think a lot more, I wish a lot more content creators focused on that as well, because I think it's so vital, so vital. But Alia, welcome back. If you could let everybody at home know where they could find you on social media.
Well, on YouTube, on your channel, and on social media, Twitter at, there it is, Alia Aloha. I should do the reverse or the mirror image thing. I should do that setting sometime, and then I'll be less.
Perfect. Well, let's dive right in. So yesterday we were all shocked. I think everybody, whether if you're a fan or the industry, we were shocked to find out yesterday that Bob Chapek fired Peter Rice. Fired Peter Rice. Now Peter Rice is pretty high on the corporate food chain over at Disney. That there were speculation that he might even be in the running to replace Bob Chapek if Chapek wasn't working out. This is a big deal. This is a very, very, very big deal. Alia, I'm going to start with you. Before we kind of dive in and deep dive into this whole thing, what are your overall thoughts in regards to this move made by Bob Chapek?
Well, what's important to emphasize is that it's not really just Bob Chapek. And in that way, the headlines and all that are unfair. It's Bob Chapek and the board fired Peter Rice. And what's interesting to me is how, yes, the headlines, the places that know better, the trades, they admit that. It's all about Chapek fires. They don't put Disney in general or Chapek and the board. As far as my reaction, I wasn't completely surprised. There were some rumors, rumblings I was seeing in some blogs areas that I just like Google and come across links and articles and read things that there were reports that Peter Rice was in some ways a mole agent of Iger. So I wasn't in that way when it happened. I wasn't completely surprised.
That's interesting. You brought up a lot of great points, Alia. Right out the gate, you brought up some really great points. In that, you're right. It's not just about Chapek. This isn't just about Chapek. The board. Well, look, the board had to, at the very least, approve to pay him to kind of end his contract early. right? That like write that check to him to leave early. So the board at the very least had to at least do that, right? And so it's not just Chapek, it is the board. And I think that's very, very interesting. Mr. Vashkai, what are your overall thoughts in regards to this whole situation with Peter Rice, Bob Chapek, the board? Where do you kind of stand on it overall?
Well, I mean, to Aldia's point, I wasn't exactly shocked that Peter Rice was going to, was going to be, let's say, separated from the company. I was surprised in how it happened and when it happened specifically. I just, to me personally, I always felt that Peter Rice maybe wasn't the best fit for Disney. That, especially with the way that Disney was headed, or at least in the way that Chapek wanted it to head in. I always felt Peter Rice was much more of a kind of maybe an Iger loyalist. I mean, obviously, when that Fox acquisition happened, a lot of those executives could have gone a lot of different places, and Iger kept them on board. And I think Peter Rice always had kind of a maybe a loyalty to Iger because of that. And now with this kind of new Chapek regime, as you will, maybe it wasn't necessarily the best fit. It's interesting because you you texted me this information while I was actually in a hotel room in California, sawing logs and stuff like that, and I get a buzz from my phone, check on it, and I'm straight up. And the reason why is because of how it actually happened. This was, to me, not just, severing ties with Peter Rice, but this was really, to me, a signal across not just Disney, but across the entire entertainment landscape that Disney's heading into a new direction, and anybody that doesn't quite, fit that mold, might get severed. And in a way that's, you've got a lot of industry moguls and so forth coming out and saying, oh, you shouldn't have done it this way. You give them a cover story, you give them, the family or whatever, right? All that kind of stuff that we hear. But in order to do it this way, I think it was sent a very, very powerful message there. And whether it emanated from the board or maybe had the board's blessing and emanated from Chapek himself, I think it's very, very fascinating, the kind of moves that are being made here. Me personally, I think, Chapek, he got a lot of heat in April. The whole company did. And we saw that with, constant news coverage and so forth on, what they were doing out in Florida and so forth. And I think Chapek's looking to right those wrongs and ensure that this doesn't happen again. While also, taking the company maybe in a different direction than maybe they were on previously.
It's interesting, Dre, that you brought up like how a lot of these, and I've seen it too in the Hollywood trades. I'm gonna bring something up in a second. A clip from an article from the Hollywood Reporter. But I see a lot of the complaining about, couldn't they have given him a cover story and all this stuff? And it's like, what is going on with that? Let's go ahead and I'm going to share this real quick. It says here, this is from the Hollywood Reporter, okay? It says here, it was not merely the dismissal of Rice, but the manner in which it was done that fueled the outrage. Quote, by firing the guy this way, everyone else says, is this what he'll do to me? Says a high-level executive at Disney, at a Disney competitor. Notes a source with ties to the company. Quote, at Disney, at that level, you don't treat an executive that way. You give him a production deal. You give him a cover story. You give him a party. You walk them out the door. If you have to execute someone, there are ways to do it. It's the lack of touch. It's like this guy Chapek doesn't know how things are done in our town. This reeks of everything that people hate about Hollywood. Okay, so here's Chapek. This screams Mean Girls. Oh, you know what, Chapek? You can't sit at our table. You're not cool enough. Who is this guy? Oh, he's not cool enough to sit with us. It reeks of that. And it's like, look, here's the thing. If the dude isn't working out, fire him. Why are you going to sit here and give the guy a cover story, give him a party, give him some sort of production deal? Why all the keeping up appearances bullshit? If he's not working out, let the guy go. Obviously, Peter Rice is a talented executive. I'm not diminishing the guy. He's going to land on his feet somewhere else. So why waste your time? Why waste Peter Rice's time? I don't understand this narrative that they needed to like coddle this guy on his way out. It's insulting to Peter Rice, and it's baloney. It's a waste of everyone's time, in my opinion. But what do you think, Alia?
Well, I mean, in some ways, maybe they could have done this, but he's going to be fine. As you mentioned, he received his entire the entire contract. He received that entire payout. And then also, yes, he's talented. I'm sure someone else is going to scoop him up. But also, though, they needed to do this way because it does fit. At first, when I saw that, I read everything, all sides, all considerations. But when I saw that about that whole behind the scenes and the Disney conflict and Iger's behind it, and maybe Peter Rice is the person on the inside, I kind of dismissed it. But then when this happened, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe they were right. That one that came across, and then come to find out it was that link you sent. I was like, oh my gosh, that was the party. Maybe they're onto something. So if that's all true, they had to do it this way to send a loud and clear message, Chapek and the board, to Iger. This was put up or shut up to Iger. Right. Because Iger is trying to do something. And so in a way, they are saying, if this isn't the person for you, if you don't like what Chapek is doing, mount like a legal shareholder revolt, do something, but stop this underpinning undercurrent. So I think it was the board and Chapek giving a loud and clear message to Iger.
Well, and that's interesting that you mentioned this, Alia, that you're kind of saying like, okay, Rice is kind of like an internal mole for Bob Iger, like Team Iger, right? And we've seen this. Bob Iger has kind of undermined Chapek a lot, really, since they had a falling out. I mean, he undermined him recently with the Florida bill when he was, quote, retweeting Joe Biden and things like that. And Rice obviously is closer with Bob Iger than he is with Bob Chapek. I mean, Rice had a professional relationship with Bob Chapek, but it's very clear that he was friends, though, with Bob Iger. So Iger has like these loyalists within the company, right? And it's interesting to see this whole dynamic play out. Now, does someone like Bob Chapek keep an Iger loyalist that high on the food chain, knowing he's kind of like, I don't want to say openly hostile, but potentially? You know, I don't know. I mean, would anyone keep that? And then, you know, so that's interesting that, you know, that whole dynamic is there. And you mentioned that like the board was sending a message, hey, Bob Iger, Team Iger, either put up or shut up. And I completely agree with that. I am so tired of this whole thing where it's like Bob Iger is like, you know, the saint who's like hands off. It's not his problem. Bob Chapek was promoted like 3 times under Bob Iger. When Bob Iger was CEO, he's promoted like 3 times. He moved up that ladder very fast under Bob Iger. Then he was hand selected by Bob Iger to be the CEO, and then it was rubber stamped by the board because Iger walks on water, right? It was all Bob Iger. Chapek being in the position he's in was all Bob Iger, and people want to pretend like he has nothing to do with it. He has everything to do with it. Chapek only had the job because of Bob Iger. Now, after the fact, Bob Iger wants to kind of like behind the scenes kind of undermine him, right? And it's like, you know what? Why do all that? If you don't like the decision you made, or if you're regretting it, then like what you're saying, Alia, mount like a public offense where it's like what Roy Disney did with Stanley Gold against Michael Eisner, a shareholder revolt. Do it that way. But this underhanded bullshit behind the scenes, I'm really tired of it. And he threw Bob Chapek under the bus right before the pandy. And, you know, it was just dirty all around. I'm sorry. It was dirty all around. But what do you think, Dre? What are your feelings on this, man?
Oh, no, 100%, 100%. And usually you want to, you know, sever these things off. In a way, you know, in Hollywood, it's all about relationships, right? It's all about business relationships and so forth. And usually that's why you would normally want to sever ties with somebody in a way that's a little bit more diplomatic.
Schmoozy.
Say, right? Yeah, a little bit, right? A little bit. But I think the message was far more powerful and far more tangible and far more valuable than just, you know, a couple business relationships that maybe Peter Rice has on his own. And, you know, it's interesting. And to give more credence to maybe this idea that Peter Rice was kind of on more of the Bob Iger train than he was the Bob Chapek train. It's interesting, if you look back at his comments, following the HB 1557 incident that occurred and really sent shockwaves throughout Disney and so forth in terms of press coverage and all of that. Peter Rice kind of added to it a little bit, and he said this, and I find it fascinating. Personally, I see this law as a violation of fundamental human rights, and I condemn any attempt to marginalize individuals on the basis of their identity. Okay, fair enough. I appreciate that Bob recognized that we must do more to support the LGBTQ plus community. Recognized. That he eventually recognized it, kind of thing. That he eventually came around, but Peter Rice was already on board. That language right there. I mean, it's undermining the message and the kind of I don't know, what is it, kind of group stance that they were taking at the time. Oh, he eventually recognized it, good for him kind of thing. And this just, it speaks to all of this kind of, like you guys have said, kind of undermining of this kind of, Chapek, what is it, administration, for lack of a better term, that we've been seeing here. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the Reimagine Tomorrow videos that went, viral and provided a lot of this press coverage and so forth, this negative press coverage, I should say, weren't those people in TV kind of working within Peter Rice's division?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So it's kind of, I think the message is loud and clear. Hey, look, listen, we're gonna. I think culturally, I think business wise, I think Disney is kind of headed in a new direction. I think the board has kind of put the onus on Chapek to head in that direction, or at least have given their blessing to Chapek to head in that direction. And I think it's like I said, a very powerful message saying, hey, look, if you try to undermine me, or if you're not on board with what I'm doing, you're going to be gone. None of this, Reimagine Tomorrow viral stuff. None of this backlashing from the decisions that I make, and you're going to put me in a bad position like you did in April. That ain't going to happen again. That ain't going to fly. And this is that I think first, one of many, maybe Jeff Morrell might be involved in this as well, but one of these stepping stones to get to where Chapek wants to be.
And what strengthened? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Ali. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. What strengthened Chapek with that too, ironically, is the competitors. Because as I mentioned in another stream, I think his big worry why all of this happened, he was worried about employees, creatives leaving the company for the competition. But now that the competition has come out with their statements or lack of action, Netflix, Universal, sure, Warner Brothers, etc., he knows now that these employees really don't have any place to go minus more money, so to speak. That would be their only statement. He knows now that they don't have a safe haven, so to speak, at other companies. So that worry, the competition made it easy for him too. That worry was gone too. That's
a very astute point. I remember you making that quite a few weeks ago, Alia, and I thought that was a really, really great point. That, hey, look, listen, you have Netflix, they're cutting ties. Zaslav, from what I understand, is cutting ties with executives all across the board. Which, by the way, OG, as you brought out in Twitter, I believe this morning or last, hey, Zaslav makes all these moves, doesn't get a peek from Hollywood. Chapek fires one executive and everybody loses their minds. That kind of stuff, right?
That's true. That's a good point. That's
true.
I
mean, Zaslav is firing like half a dozen people left on a daily basis. Yeah, he's firing people right and left unceremoniously, by the way. Like all the trades love to say that. Oh, he was fired unceremoniously, Peter Rice was. Is Zaslav throwing a party for all these people he's firing? I certainly expect not. I'm sure that it's just like, see ya, right? Pink slip, there you go. And that's fine. And everyone makes jokes about it. Like, oh, yeah, the acts of Zaslav. And, oh, he, and
isn't he adorable?
Isn't he adorable?
He's
firing
cheaper than Chapek. That's the big thing, It's like
right. Isn't he adorable? Just firing all these people, and how he's making Warner Brothers so lean. It's always framed in like this positive thing, and then Chapek fires one dude, and it's the end of the world. And the funniest thing too, the narratives in the trades is so like transparent. Like you could totally see it. there's this big narrative right now that like Bob Chapek fires one of his rivals. Oh, well, Peter Rice was in the running to replace Bob Chapek, so clearly that's why he fired him. This is the narrative that I think, in my opinion, is total bullshit. Because look, firing Peter Rice doesn't accomplish anything. It's not like firing him, Peter Rice no longer becomes a rival. Disney, we've already seen, and it's been heavily rumored, Disney's looking outside of the company. Tom Staggs, who hasn't worked for Disney in years, is being rumored to replace Bob Chapek. So just because Peter Rice now doesn't work for Disney doesn't mean that he can't replace Chapek. So this whole notion that like Chapek fixes it by firing Rice is bullshit.
Yeah.
And then they're ignoring that the board was involved. So if the board was actively looking at candidates, it makes no sense they would support and be involved firing one of the candidates. It's just, they're not addressing that. No one's answering that in all these headlines and everything. It's just
Well, it's Zaslav and other people are the golden children, and then you got Chapek out there on the island, like we said, early in this discussion. It's he's challenging kind of this Hollywood establishment structure and this it's our town kind of thing, and it's like every single time I see the trades freak out over Chapek, I kind of smile inside because it's like.
He's freaking them out.
Exactly, you're freaking them out, and I think it's well deserved, to be quite frank.
Well, and here's the thing too, and a lot of people look. You don't make it to where Chapek is by being a sweetheart of a guy.
Right.
I got news for you. Walt Disney was not a sweetheart of a guy either, and I'm not saying Chapek is in the same league as Walt Disney. Okay, I'm not nowhere close. But these men and these women that climb this ladder and become very powerful, whether it be Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, whoever it is Hillary Clinton, whoever, they don't get to those positions by being super nice and letting people walk all over them. Chapek is cutthroat, and he has to be where he's at. Steve Jobs was cutthroat. Walt Disney was cutthroat. These people get to where they are because they are cutthroat. Go watch HBO Max's series Succession. Okay, this is how the corporate culture works. Okay, it's this corporate chess game, and people don't understand that. They really don't. They think like, Chapek, because he runs Disney, needs to be nice, needs to play nice. Not really. Walt Disney didn't play nice. He had the persona on the camera. Yes, absolutely. The optics. Behind the scenes, though, Walt Disney was a go-getter. He was cutthroat. He was not this sweetheart little wallflower. It's crazy. Crazy.
And he had to be, because Walt was taking advantage several times on his way to the top, and I think he understood. He's like, hey, I better have my guard up when climbing the entertainment ladder, so to speak, right? And look, Disney, I mean, anybody in the industry knows, those executives are cutthroat. The lawyers are cutthroat. They play hardball, and I think Chapek understands that more than anybody. And honestly, I think Peter Rice, wish him the very best, absolutely, but I just don't think he was a good fit, and I think he may have participated in the act of undermining of Chapek across the board. And by the way, I just want to dispel some rumors here, because we saw some people, I don't know, put on their business, pseudo business degrees and say all this kind of stuff on
the
Twitter.
sports analogy.
Yeah, the sports
about
analogy.
The statement, two different worlds.
It is absolutely two different worlds. I will say, some people were saying, vote of confidence. Oh, the board is held to some fiduciary duty and they have to make accurate statements and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, understand, guys, that vote of confidence. That's not exactly legal terminology, right? That's not legally binding precedent.
Okay.
They have to follow from here to perpetuity. Now,
so it's like in the middle, kind of. The truth is in the middle.
It's kind of in the middle. It's not the kiss of death like the sports analogy. I won't say, but it's also it doesn't bind them legally for the month, the quarter, so forth. They can make moves if they want to, right? That just means that they have vote of confidence with him today. And I do think I do think they do. I do think they also put out that statement to kind of, keep Wall Street kind of like, hey, we're not making too big of changes, but we are making the necessary changes to put us in the right direction. So
And
I
the
just kind
message
of
to
want to
Iger.
get that out. Yeah. Oh, absolutely a message to Iger. But that's not necessarily Wall Street. That's, the Hollywood kind of complex right there. Like, hey, look, listen, stop effing around with us kind of thing. And I think I think that's what's going to occur going forward. I personally believe. I think Chapek's going to take the reins here.
Yeah. Well, I think Chapek's surprising a lot of people. You can hate the guy. But I mean, at least for me, I going into this whole thing, right, with Chapek, I didn't expect him to like be so aggressive and ruffling feathers. Mm-hmm. I really pictured him a little more kind of passive, like maybe like cheap but like he wouldn't like rock the boat too much, right? Okay, he'll do Genie Plus, and maybe he'll cut your budget in the parks, do that and the other. But he's not gonna rock the boat too much. I was so wrong on that. This guy does not care. He rocks the boat all day long. I mean, he this whole thing with Peter Rice, it was an earthquake, a massive seismic event in Hollywood, and Chapek was all for it. The guy's willing to take risks. The guy's willing to kind of go all out. And I'm actually very surprised. And I think it actually took Bob Iger and his team a little bit by surprise as well. I think Bob Iger's team kind of expected Chapek will get in there and sort of just kind of continue what Iger was doing and just sort of get things chugging along, right? Very neutral. And I think it surprised a lot of Iger and his loyalists that, no, Bob Iger is taking the bull by the horns. And he's doing his own thing, and I think it really shocked them quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think everything that happened in April was a response to that. I think it was a lashing out of that. I think people within the Iger camp and some people who were Iger friendly or Iger adjacent used the bill as a pretext for their lashing out. They would have taken anything, but it just so happened that it happened to work out that way. But honestly, I think they knew this was these kind of moves were coming, that the company was going to be taken in a direction, and they lashed out and attempted to stop it and all that kind of stuff. But I to me it signals that Chapek is undeterred. To me it signals that, hey, look, we're going to follow the audience. We're going to follow the data, as it were, right? We're going in this direction, and we're going in this direction whether you like it or not. And I think it's fascinating. Now, what do we know about this Dana Walden and moving her into Peter Rice's position while also retaining her previous one? Do we know anything about this dynamic at all?
The Dana Walden, from what I understand, has worked very closely with Peter Rice for decades. Mm-hmm. She came over to Disney with Peter Rice through that Fox acquisition in 2019. Right. And her and Rice work very closely. From what I understand, she's a brilliant businesswoman. She's done very well in the position that she's held for the past few years at Disney. Obviously, it impressed Chapek enough that he promoted her. And not only, this is the interesting thing with Dana Walden, not only did she get the promotion, but she's like, it's not like she's just taking over Rice's job. She's maintaining her position and taking over Rice's job. They're not replacing the role. Like, she's just taking on more responsibility. So Chapek really likes Dana quite a bit. He's putting all his eggs in the Dana Walden basket. Okay. Which is funny to me too. And Alia, we kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday. Isn't it funny? This progressive Hollywood thing, right? Oh, glass ceiling and people of color, this, that, and the other, right? Except for one Deadline article that mentioned it, that Alia, you brought to my attention. None of the trades, none of the Hollywood outlets are even talking about this Dana Walden position is the biggest, most influential, powerful position within the Walt Disney Company ever held by a woman. Ever held by a woman. And nobody is talking about that. All the talk about, glass ceiling and all that, and none of the Hollywood trades are talking about it. They're too busy defending the middle-aged white male. Isn't that funny?
Interesting enough, Chapek with his promotions, all that, Kareem and now Dana has put in place with diversity representation 2 people that potentially, because he's in his 60s, you could say maybe, he decides to retire if his contract extends in about 10 years, his 70s. So he has in place either a man of color or a woman, in place to be the next CEO. So, and it's interesting how Hollywood is all raising the defenses of a white man, and they're totally ignoring that, except that one article kind of touched on it. Like, wait a second. But it is interesting how they are ignoring that, when that was like one of the first things I saw. I was like, oh my gosh, what Chapek's doing? That's great for representation.
And Alia, did you also notice in that article, they mentioned Anne Sweeney. Now, Bob Iger fired Anne Sweeney.
And she was a top contender to be the next CEO, and yet he fired her.
She was a television executive as well, and Bob Iger fired her. Now, Bob Iger, though, kept up the appearances like they want Chapek to do with Peter Rice, where I think he let her resign, but he let her go. But Deadline left that out. Isn't that funny? So,
Isn't that interesting?
More defensive Iger. Yeah, Team Iger there.
It's almost like...
Here's the thing. I don't dislike Bob Iger. I actually really respect the man. I'm losing a little respect, though. I gotta admit,
he just needs to let go. He needs to let go. He needs to stop regretting. He didn't act in those end days as chair. He just needs to let it go. Follow the lyrics of that song. Let it go.
You made your decision, Bob Iger. You chose Bob Chapek. This is the guy that's running Disney now. Live with it. And if you don't want to live with it, then mount a shareholder revolt a la Roy Disney 2005. Either accept it or actively work to remove Bob Chapek, but don't ride that fence and work from the shadows. It's just dirty. And you're only hurting Disney, the company that he claims he loves so much, when you do shit like that.
It's almost like he never cared about Disney, and that they were just a means to an end, and the following days after his retirement, or what is it, longest goodbye party of all time, it is becoming more evident that maybe he was a little bit more self-involved than maybe any of us ever thought. And it is revealing, to be quite honestly. Yeah, the long goodbye. Man, he stretched that thing out forever. It's like, okay, buddy, okay,
I was getting to the point. I thought he was going to change his mind.
We're moving on
again.
here. Okay. It's like, wow. But look, listen. It's. I don't like that Iger is doing that either. Obviously, I mean, credit to Michael Eisner. When he left. He did his own thing. He was completely out and let Iger do his own thing. Why Iger can't actually allow that for Chapek, I mean, it's just beyond me. It's like he's almost scared of Chapek's emerging success, and he's been trying to undermine it every step of the way, because he feels like Chapek will be far more successful than him, and he just can't allow that. Just can't have that whatsoever. And it's becoming clearer every day that may be the case, and it's astounding.
Oh, it's absolutely astounding. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. Now, I want to kind of ask you. I want to ask you both, because February 2023 is coming up fast and furious.
Sure it is.
Fast and furious. Alia, what are your thoughts right now as we stand in June of 2022? As we stand right now, is the board gonna renew Bob Chapek's contract in February?
Yes. The only mystery is if it's for a 3-year extension or if it's until retirement sort of concept. Now, I did notice that the stock is kind of falling larger than even the competitors like Comcast today. So Wall Street might be saying, thanks for that statement, that clarification, but And that way, unfortunately, maybe one of the hit pieces is correct, that they should come out more definitively, that we signed him, we renewed him, this is it. So I think Wall Street's saying that's nice, but give us something a little bit more definitive. So it'll be interesting to see if the board responds to that hint from Wall Street today. So
yes, and that is an issue for the board, because there were some people in the Hollywood trades, which I think they make a good point. If you have full confidence in Chapek, why is it less than a year out from his renewal and you haven't renewed him yet, right? And I think that's a valid point to make. I mean, I think that should have been done. Absolutely.
How did that work out in the past? I wasn't sure or remembering. Like, was Iger ever up for renewal? Or I just can't remember details of others of how.
I believe
it was that they released the news that, okay, the CEO has been renewed.
I believe, I mean, they came at it, I think, pretty early every single time that they extended.
Oh, yeah. And that, I think that's maybe why the stock is falling today, more in, WBD's kind of falling too. But in comparison to Comcast, it's more. I think that's why Wall Street's saying, okay, that's great, but say something, So there might be a point to that.
Yeah. They should. They should come out soon and say, hey, look, we're renewing this guy, 3 years, whatever. But I think the statement without the actual name on the dotted line, it feels a little toothless, I will admit.
Well, also too, there was no reason given, which is also an interesting story. Apparently, Peter Rice seeked that information out, and it's like, not today, sir. So that's kind of an interesting kind of subplot. But for Wall Street, and what you'd like to hear is, we separated ties with Peter Rice. Not a good fit, didn't work out. We're streamlining our executive structure, getting rid of some, we're getting rid of some, maybe trimming some fat, on that kind of thing, making it a little bit more, maybe making our executive structure a little bit more efficient and so forth. You'd like to hear stuff like that in terms of Wall Street. I think if I was an investor, I would kind of look at it and go, is this petty? Is this, are these kind of competition, accusations?
Yeah, they got so
accurate?
Focused on sending a loud and clear message to Iger, I think they forgot. We have to pacify. I think they thought. They presume Wall Street would be fine with it, but Wall Street's like, this is weird. What's happening?
Yeah, exactly. It's created a lot of uncertainty around some of their maybe mixed messaging towards other places. I fully agree, Alia.
Yeah. It really does remind me a lot of, like, in '94, I think it was when Michael Eisner refused to promote Katzenberg, and Katzenberg walked. And then he started DreamWorks. And I remember being a kid, and I was obsessed with Disney back then even. I remember being worried, like, oh my God, Katzenberg is starting a company, DreamWorks, with Steven Spielberg. This is going to be huge competition. Not so much. That's the funny thing, because Katzenberg was really perfect at Disney because he had, I guess, the right people around him.
Mm-hmm.
But once you put him in DreamWorks doing his own thing, he was kind of mediocre at best. A lot. The DreamWorks live action, I think I ended up folding or something. I don't even hear about that anymore. And then the animation was sold off to Comcast.
The sad thing is Comcast said only on the condition no Katzenberg or something.
Really?
Is that what they said?
Is that what they said?
I think I read that somewhere. I mean,
Comcast
they said it in business. They said it in business speak.
They're pretty. Brian Roberts over there is pretty
I felt bad for him in that way.
Well, I mean, from what I understand, Katzenberg, from what I have heard about him, is he can be abrasive. He definitely likes to take credit and promote himself and stuff like that. I mean,
everybody in Hollywood, come on.
I guess, but I guess he's a little bit more harder to work with than everybody else. And look, Disney Animation wasn't quite high on Jeffrey Katzenberg telling him what to do and so forth. And Jeffrey Katzenberg definitely had his conflicts with Disney Animation in part. But I think personally, looking at it, I think they kind of needed each other. Like they needed the balance, between them. And I think they, Disney Animation and Katzenberg, I think like you said, OG, or at least alluded to, I think they worked best while they were together. And when they went off their separate ways is kind of when, the people responded, oh, we're going to show up Jeffrey Katzenberg by doing this and that. And maybe his ideas weren't as malformed as maybe they had previously thought. And I think Jeffrey Katzenberg kind of same way. It's interesting, but hey, look, listen, he could just go off and start his own streaming service, and he can compete in the. Oh wait, that didn't quite work out there.
Yeah.
Oh well, these things happen.
They happen. But this Peter Rice story is definitely a developing story. I'm really glad we got to sit down today and kind of talk about our theories, speculation, our analysis, our input. There's a lot going on here, and I think we're going to hear a lot more. But as of right now, and I'll go around the panel. We'll kind of do our closing thoughts. But as of right now, I think that the bulk of the reason why Chapek let him go was because he really did feel like he wasn't a fit at Disney. I think the rival narrative on the Hollywood trades is kind of bullshit because, like I mentioned before, Disney can consider outside candidates. Like Rice doesn't need to work for Disney in order for him to be considered. So that whole thing is kind of like just a narrative they're pushing out there to make it Chapek look shady. I think that really, I just think it wasn't working with Chapek's like vision for the company. And from what I understand, Rice kind of works in a bubble. He doesn't like to kind of collaborate with other divisions of the company. And Chapek has been on record, and Ollie, we talked about this with Jay from the Story Geeks. He's been on record of really wanting that kind of cross-pollination between all the departments.
And Dana does that apparently.
And what? I'm sorry?
Dana does that apparently. So
Dana does that, and Peter doesn't. And I think that
she has great relationships with talent and things like that too.
Yeah. So maybe that might have been the sticking point. I think that's probably more or less what it was in actuality. But Dre, closing thoughts on the whole Peter Rice thing.
Oh yeah, and to maybe add a little bit on that point there, I maybe Peter didn't want to work with anybody for a reason, right? Compartmentalized support for maybe his way of doing things, and maybe that wasn't quite okay. The cross pollination, the synergy is really, really important for Disney right now. The way to leverage items like Disney Plus across divisions, it's going to be vital, extremely important for their business model going forward. So I think that was a definite reason as well. But I will say, I think Peter Rice is only the first domino to fall here. I think we might get, executive shakeups across the way.Maybe not at this high extreme level, but definitely look at those kind of mid-level executive positions. I think this is a major step here in an ongoing story, like you said, OG. And it's gonna be fascinating to watch. I don't think Chapek's out of it, quite yet, but I think he is. I mean, it's at this point, it's either them or me in terms of where Chapek is right now.
Yeah,
and I think it's gonna be them for at least until February. We'll see where this goes. It's a fascinating thing for sure.
It is. Alia, final thoughts on the Peter Rice Chapek Disney board situation?
Well, big picture, I do wonder how different things would be if the concerned employees at Disney convinced their peers, or why their peers at Netflix or Comcast or Warner Brothers didn't join them. It just makes me wonder how different things would be, because then, yes, Netflix came out with, if you don't like it here, some things we might not do, you won't like, you can leave. Universal was silent. Warner Brothers, yes, they've come out. Zaslav wants things to be centrist. So that then did strengthen and embolden Chapek, and I don't blame him for that. And I just wonder how different things would be if that happened. And not really connected to Rice, but I guess it is. But especially when it's just apparent that in the means to the end, Bob Iger, through most likely Peter Rice, was trying to undercut and cause issues at Disney, utilizing all that and using those employees. So.
Right. Fascinating. Oh man, I love the corporate drama. This is some of my favorite stuff to talk about. I love it. It's so fascinating to me. But I know everyone watching, I know you have opinions on this. Comment down below with everything that you feel is going on here with the Peter Rice, Bob Chapek, Disney boards situation. We'd love to hear from you. Matthew Murr, Ranking the Mouse, everybody comment down below.
Theme Park Casual, please.
Yeah, this is a developing story. I mean, we'll definitely make more videos on this going forward because I'm sure there's gonna be more to discuss. But this is kind of like just like the first video to kind of get our thoughts, our initial thoughts, kind of out there, you know.
Yeah.
But I'll close it out. Vash, if you can let everybody home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Hey, best place to find me, or at least speak to me about all of this and more, I guess, is going to be at Vash Sky. It's right down there for all your robust discussion, as Christine Wasteland McCarthy would put it right there. Yeah. She's not losing the moniker, by the way. She's going to keep that. There you go. Now, Chapek's following her lead and trimming the fat. You see, that's what that is. Robust discussion right there. Oh, yeah. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now in Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh right from the grove. So that is where you can find me.
Perfect. And down below, last but not least, Alia Aloha, if you can let everybody home know where they can find you on social media.
See, when I appear on your channel, find on social media, Twitter, tweet at Alia Aloha.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on, both of you, and thank you all for watching. We'll be back next time with more information in regard to this. We have a lot to discuss, but the story has only begun. This is the very early on of the whole situation, because I think you're right, Dre.
Time.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Get that popcorn, y'all. Get that popcorn. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful.
In Sector 2. Malfunction in Sector 2. All droids will be shut down for reloading of labor programs. Stand by for power disconnect.